The golden lights of the alien capital flickered across the grand hall, a place filled with rich nobles, high-ranking traders, and cold-hearted bidders. The air smelled of expensive perfume mixed with something rotten, greed. Every seat was full and every eye was fixed on the stage. The emperor of the Zunari Empire sat proudly at the top balcony, his eyes cold, his crown shining like fire. In front of him, under the heavy chains of humiliation, stood his daughter, Princess Lyra. Her silver skin shimmered weakly under the bright lights, and her once beautiful wings were broken, wrapped in dull cloth. She did not look like a princess now. She looked like something thrown away. The announcer raised his voice. Lot number 77, former Princess Lyra of the Zunari royal bloodline, declared infertile and unfit for the throne. The crowd gasped, then laughed. Infertile? One alien whispered. So she can't continue the royal line? Then she's useless, said another. Maybe I'll buy her for decoration. The words stabbed her like knives, but she didn't move. She had learned long ago that tears changed nothing. Her father's empire valued only power and blood, not love or mercy. The moment the doctor said she could never bear children, she became ashamed to her father. Now he wanted to erase her from his family forever. From the corner of the hall, a figure watched quietly. A human. He stood out easily among the tall, armored aliens. His name was Ethan, a simple mechanic who had come to the capital to buy ship parts. He had never been to an auction like this before. At first he thought it was for droids or machines, but when he saw the chained woman trembling under the lights, his heart froze. He whispered, "They're selling people." The alien beside him laughed. "Not people, human property. That's how it works here." On the stage, Lyra's eyes met Ethan's for a second. Her eyes were dull, gray, and lifeless, but there was something inside them. A tiny spark like a dying ember still trying to burn. The announcer started the bidding, starting at 500 credits. Voices rose from every corner. 600! 700! 900! The numbers grew, but they weren't bidding to save her. They were bidding for ownership. The emperor leaned back, his voice calm and cold. "She is a disgrace to my name. Take her away and never bring her back." Ethan clenched his fists. He wasn't rich and he didn't belong here, but the sight of the alien nobles laughing, whispering cruel words, and mocking a broken woman, it made his blood boil. He had lost his wife years ago, and he remembered the same lifeless eyes when she died. Something deep inside him said, "No one deserves this." He raised his hand slowly. 1,500 credits, he said. The hall went silent, heads turned, and laughter followed. Who said that? A human? Someone whispered, shocked. Ethan stood straight, his jaw firm, his eyes locked on Lyra. The announcer blinked. "The human bids 1,500 credits." A noble smirked. "You don't know what you're buying." "Human," Ethan replied quietly. "Maybe you don't know what you're selling?" The room filled with laughter again. No one else raised the bid. Not because she wasn't worth it, but because it was amusing to see a human buy royal trash sold. Shouted the announcer, hitting the hammer. The sound echoed through the hall like thunder. The emperor didn't even look down. He just said, "Remove her from my sight." Lyra was pushed forward, the guards shoving her roughly toward Ethan. She stumbled, her weak body barely able to walk. He caught her before she fell, his hands gentle but firm. For a second, she looked up at him, expecting cruelty, expecting pain, but his eyes were soft, warm, full of something she hadn't seen in years. "Kindness, don't worry," he whispered. "You're safe now." She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone for the first time in a long time. Her heart skipped a beat, not from fear but from confusion. "Why?" she asked weakly. "Why would a human buy broken things?" Ethan looked at her and smiled faintly. "Because broken things still work, just in different ways." The guards laughed behind them. "Take her and go, human fool." Ethan didn't respond. He just helped her stand and led her away. The crowd watched them leave, whispering and mocking, but no one noticed the small tear that fell from Lyra's eye, a tear that shone like glass as it dropped to the floor. She didn't know why she cried. Maybe because, for the first time, someone looked at her not as property, but as a person outside the grand hall. The stars of the alien capital glowed softly. Ethan looked up and took a deep breath. He had no idea what kind of trouble he just bought, but deep inside, he knew one thing. He wasn't going to let anyone break her again. And as they walked into the dark streets together, the galaxy shifted quietly, because somewhere among the stars, Fate had just changed its course. The shuttle trembled as it landed on the dusty colony world of Vera 5, a planet far from the shining cities of the Empire. The wind howled across the red desert. Carrying the smell of metal, fuel, and old dreams, Ethan stepped out first, his boots crunching on the sand, then turned and offered his hand to Lyra. She hesitated, still wearing the thin gray gown the guards had thrown at her, her wrists bruised from the chains. No one had ever offered her a hand before, not without wanting something in return. Slowly she took it, and the warmth of his grip surprised her. He smiled gently. "Welcome home," she blinked. Confused. "Home," she whispered, the word strange in her mouth. Ethan just nodded. "You'll understand soon." His home sat near the scrapyard, an old mechanic's workshop made from ship parts, rusted panels, and love. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of oil and the faint hum of machines. A small boy ran toward the door, his face lighting up when he saw Ethan. "Dad," he shouted, hugging his father tightly. Ethan lifted him with ease, smiling. "Hey, Jake, I'm back." The boy looked at Lyra curiously, his big brown eyes filled with wonder. "Who's she?" he asked. Ethan looked at Lyra for a moment before answering. "Someone who needs a place to rest." Lyra stood silently, watching the small human family. She didn't understand how a man and a child could live so simply and still smile so much. Her world had been full of palaces and gold, but empty of laughter. Here, even the broken lights and messy floors seemed alive. Jake tugged her hand gently. "Are you hungry?" She froze. No one had asked her that question in years. I don't know," she said softly. Ethan chuckled. "Then that's a yes," he said, and walked toward the kitchen. The meal was simple: bread, soup, and roasted grain. But to Lyra, it felt like a feast. Ethan watched her as she tried to eat carefully, as if she expected someone to take it away at any moment. When a small piece fell from her trembling hands, Jake quickly picked it up and gave it back, smiling. "It's okay, see? We drop things all the time, for a moment." Lyra felt something break inside her. Not pain, but a strange warmth she couldn't name. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan nodded. "You don't have to thank us, Lyra, just be yourself." After dinner, Ethan showed her the small room near the workshop. It had a bed, a blanket, and a small window that looked at the desert stars. Lyra ran her fingers along the wall. It was rough, imperfect, real. She turned to him. "Why are you doing this?" Ethan leaned on the doorframe, his voice calm. "Because I can. But you don't know me," she said. "I don't need to," he replied. "I just know you needed someone to stop the world from breaking you more." Then he smiled faintly. "Besides, I fix broken things for a living. Remember?" That night, Lyra couldn't sleep. The silence felt strange after years of cold prison lights and metallic noises. Outside, she could hear Ethan working in the garage, the clanking of tools, the hum of a plasma torch. Curiosity pulled her to the doorway. She watched him from the shadows as he repaired a ship engine. His hand steady, his face focused, sweat ran down his brow, and every motion showed care. He treated even broken machines with patience. She realized that maybe he was different from every other being she had ever met. "Can I help?" she asked quietly, stepping closer. Ethan looked up surprised, then nodded slowly. "Sure. Hand me that wrench." She picked it up awkwardly and passed it to him, her hand shaking slightly. The metal brushed his skin for a second, and she felt a spark, something warm and alive. For the first time, someone wasn't commanding her. He was teaching her. They worked together until late into the night, and when she accidentally burned her hand on a hot pipe, she gasped. Ethan immediately dropped his tools and rushed to her. "Let me see," he said gently, taking her hand. She tried to pull back, but he held it softly, wrapping it with a clean cloth. His touch was gentle, almost careful, as if he was afraid to hurt her more. No one ever did that before, she whispered. He looked at her, his voice low. Then they should have, when he smiled again. Something in her chest fluttered like the wings she once had. As she walked back to her room, she paused by Jake's sleeping form. The boy curled up with a small mechanical toy in his arms. Lyra knelt beside him and touched his hair lightly, whispering, "How can humans be so kind?" Outside the window, the night sky glowed with quiet stars. She looked up, feeling something new stir inside her, something she couldn't name yet. Hope, maybe, or the start of something greater. In the next room, Ethan put away his tools and glanced at her door. He sighed softly and said to himself, maybe she's not the one who's broken after all. Maybe it's the rest of us. The desert wind blew gently outside, carrying the scent of oil and dreams, and inside that small workshop, two different worlds had just begun to heal each other. The morning sun rose over the red sands of Vera 5, spilling golden light across the small mechanics workshop. Inside, the hum of tools and the soft laughter of a child filled the air. Lyra stood quietly near the window, watching Ethan teach his son Jake how to repair a small hover drone. Her silver eyes followed their movements, the careful way Ethan guided Jake's hands, the patient tone in his voice. It was strange to her, seeing a father and son work side by side, not out of duty or fear. But love in her world, love was weakness, something traded or hidden, but here, it lived in every word they spoke. For the first time in her life, Lyra wanted to belong to something like this. When Ethan noticed her watching, he smiled. Come join us. Lyra shook her head softly. I might break it, Ethan chuckled. Then you'll fit right in. We break things all the time here, Jake laughed. Nodding. Yeah, Dad broke 3 drones last week. Ethan shot him a mock glare, and Lyra couldn't help but laugh, a quiet, fragile laugh that surprised even her. The sound filled the room like light breaking through clouds. It was the first time she had laughed since her childhood. Later that day, Ethan asked, Lyra, want to see something? She followed him through a narrow path behind the workshop. The air grew cooler, and the faint scent of soil replaced the dry metallic smell of the yard. He opened a small door, and when she stepped inside, she froze. Before her eyes stretched a hidden greenhouse made from old ship glass and scrap metal. Inside, hundreds of tiny green plants reached toward the sunlight. Growing in rows of sand-filled containers, Lyra gasped softly. How are these alive here? Ethan smiled, brushing dirt from his hands. With care and patience, same way we keep engines running. He walked between the rows and picked up a small pot, showing her a pale blue flower with shimmering petals. This one's called Hope Vine, he said quietly. My wife planted it before she passed away. Lyra's eyes widened. Your wife? He nodded, a shadow crossing his face. She died 5 years ago. She wanted to make this planet bloom someday. He placed the flower gently back on the table, his voice soft. She said life always finds a way, even in dead soil. Lyra stared at the flowers, each one fragile but alive. Her heart tightened. She had spent her whole life being told she was barren, empty, useless. But here stood a man who believed that even lifeless soil could bloom again. She touched a leaf carefully, afraid it might crumble in her fingers. It didn't. It bent softly as if alive to her touch. She believed, Ethan said, that nothing stays broken forever, Lyra whispered, even people. Ethan smiled faintly, especially people. That night, the memory of the greenhouse haunted her dreams. She saw herself walking through fields of light, touching flowers that whispered her name. But the dream twisted into cold metal rooms, bright lights and sharp voices. Experiment 77 is a failure, a voice echoed in her head. Remove her from the royal list. Lyra woke up shaking, sweat covering her skin. Her breath came fast, and tears slid down her face. She hadn't cried since the day her father called her a defect. The old pain burned again, sharper than ever. Ethan rushed into her room, his eyes filled with concern. Lyra, what's wrong? She shook her head, trying to hide her face. It's nothing, just memories. He knelt beside her bed, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. Nightmares? He asked softly. She nodded. They made me a test subject before they sold me. They tried to fix me, to make me useful again. Her voice broke, and Ethan's chest tightened. He didn't know what to say, so he simply sat there with her, letting silence do what words could not. After a long moment, he said quietly, You're not what they said you are. She looked at him with tear-filled eyes. How do you know? He smiled gently. Because I've seen broken things, machines, ships, even people, and I've learned something. He pointed toward the window where the first light of dawn touched the sky. If there's still a spark, even a small one, it can be fixed. Lyra wiped her tears slowly, whispering, and if there's no spark left? Ethan looked at her with calm certainty. Then you make one. Outside, the wind moved softly through the desert. In the greenhouse, the hope vines turned toward the light, blooming brighter than before. Lyra walked out after Ethan left. Standing among the glowing plants, she placed her hand over her chest, feeling the faint, steady beat beneath her ribs. It felt stronger tonight, more alive maybe, she thought. She wasn't completely broken after all. Maybe something inside her was trying to bloom again. And in that quiet garden of light and dust, a new chapter began. One that neither she nor Ethan could yet see coming, because sometimes the smallest seeds grow into the biggest miracles. The twin moons of Zynar Prime glowed cold above the Imperial Palace, their silver light spilling across marble floors and golden walls. The Emperor sat alone in his throne room, his face hidden beneath the shadows of his crown. Servants and guards stood far away, afraid to breathe too loudly. A messenger knelt before him, trembling, holding a glowing holoscreen in his claws. "My Emperor," he stammered, "we have received troubling news." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "Speak." The messenger swallowed hard. "Your daughter, Princess Lyra, she lives." The Emperor froze, his golden robe shifting like molten metal. "She was sold, disposed of," he growled, his voice echoing across the hall. The messenger's voice shook. "Yes, my lord, but she was purchased by a human." The Emperor rose slowly, every movement filled with anger and disbelief. "A human," he repeated, the word dripping with disgust. The messenger nodded quickly. "Reports say she now lives on Vera 5 with a human mechanic and his child." For a long moment, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the throne's power core. Then the Emperor's claws tightened on the armrest, cracking the gold plating. "My daughter, reduced to the pet of a dirt-born species," he hissed. "Unacceptable." He turned to his guards, his eyes glowing red with fury. "Send hunters. Bring her back, alive if possible. If not—" He paused, his voice turning cold as ice. "Erase her completely. Far away on Vera 5. Ethan had no idea the storm that was coming. Life had finally begun to feel peaceful. Lyra smiled more now, laughed more often, and sometimes hummed strange alien tunes while working beside him. Jake adored her, following her everywhere like a shadow. For the first time, the small family felt complete. Ethan often caught himself thinking, maybe this is what life's supposed to be. But that peace was fragile one evening. As Ethan closed the workshop, a stranger walked in. His eyes hidden behind dark lenses. "Need repairs?" Ethan asked casually, wiping grease from his hands. The man smiled faintly, his voice low. "Actually, I'm looking for someone." Something about that smile made Ethan uneasy. The man slid a small hollow device across the counter. Lyra's old royal insignia glowed on it. Ethan's heart froze. "Where did you get that?" he asked quietly. The stranger tilted his head. "She's property of the Emperor, mechanic. Hand her over, and maybe your little boy keeps his pretty life." The sound of metal dropped from Ethan's hand as his wrench clattered to the floor. He looked at the man with steady eyes, his voice low. "You should leave." The bounty hunter smirked. "You think you can protect her? You're just a human." Ethan stepped closer, his jaw tight. "You're right," he said. "But I'm her human." The hunter's grin faded, replaced by a snarl. "Then you die with her." He pressed a button, and more hunters appeared from the shadows. 5, 10, maybe more, their armor reflecting the workshop lights. Lyra heard the commotion from the back and ran in, her silver skin glowing faintly under the alarms. When she saw the insignia, she froze. "My father," she whispered. Ethan turned to her. "You knew this might happen?" Her voice cracked. "I thought he'd forget me. He never forgets his shame." The hunters closed in, weapons humming with energy. Ethan grabbed a plasma wrench from the wall and handed Jake a small comm device. "Hide in the storage tunnel," he said firmly, "and don't come out until I call." Jake's eyes filled with fear. "Dad," Ethan smiled faintly. "Go, kiddo. I'll fix this too." Lyra's hand shook as she looked at the armed soldiers. She wanted to surrender, to protect the only family she had left. But Ethan stepped in front of her, raising his weapon. "Stay behind me," he said quietly. The leader of the hunters laughed. "You think you can fight the Emperor's men?" Ethan shrugged. "Guess we'll find out." The first shot lit up the workshop. Energy bolts shattered walls. Sparks flew and smoke filled the air. Ethan moved fast, using his tools like weapons, striking with the strength of desperation. Lyra screamed his name and felt something deep inside her awaken, a surge of blue light rippling through her veins. Her eyes glowed bright silver as she raised her hands, and an invisible wave burst from her palms, throwing 2 hunters across the room. The others hesitated, fear flickering for the first time. Ethan stared in shock. "Lyra, what was that?" She didn't know, but the power felt like a forgotten part of her. Maybe the same scientists who took her fertility had awakened something else inside her instead. The fight raged until the last hunter fell unconscious. The workshop was half destroyed, smoke curling from the broken roof. Ethan leaned against the wall, blood on his arm. Breathing hard, Lyra ran to him, her eyes wide with worry. "You're hurt." He smiled weakly. "Just a scratch. I've had worse fixing engines." Outside, the night was silent again, but both of them knew it wasn't over. Lyra looked at the distant stars, fear and guilt heavy in her chest. "They'll keep coming," she whispered. "He won't stop until I'm gone." Ethan reached out, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Then we make him stop," he said, "together." And as the broken workshop flickered with sparks and smoke, a new kind of fire was born. Not one of destruction, but defiance, the kind that changes destinies. The night sky over Vera 5 was burning red. Fires still smoldered from the attack that had torn through Ethan's workshop hours earlier. The air smelled of smoke, melted steel, and danger. Ethan stood in the doorway of his half-ruined home, his shirt torn, his arm wrapped in a strip of fabric soaked with blood. Beside him stood Lyra, silent, her silver eyes glowing faintly under the flickering lights. Behind them, little Jake peeked out from the shadows, clutching a small wrench like it was a sword. They had survived the first wave, but both knew it was far from over. The Emperor's hunters had failed, but failure meant more were coming. Lyra turned to Ethan, her voice trembling. "They won't stop. My father will send entire squads now." Ethan tightened his jaw. "Then we'll be ready for them." She looked at him, confused and scared. "You can't fight an empire." "Ethan," he smiled faintly. "I'm not fighting an empire, Lyra. I'm fighting for my family." He led her outside into the scrapyard that stretched behind the workshop. Mountains of broken ships, old engines, and metal junk surrounded them. To anyone else, it looked like piles of trash, but to Ethan, "It was home, this place," he said, picking up an old plasma coil. "Has everything we need." Lyra blinked. "For what?" He grinned. "To fight back." For hours they worked side by side. Ethan built makeshift defense turrets using old mining drones. Lyra used her strange new energy powers to charge their batteries. She still didn't understand where her power came from, but every time she focused, the air shimmered around her hands. Jake helped too, running tools, connecting wires, and keeping watch. It wasn't much, but it was hope. And hope was something even the Emperor's soldiers couldn't take away. By dawn, the scrapyard looked different. Hidden weapons blinked softly among piles of junk, and drones floated silently above the ground. Ethan wiped the sweat from his brow. "If they come again, we'll make them regret stepping foot here?" Lyra stared at him amazed. "Why do you risk so much for me?" He turned to her, his eyes steady. "Because no one ever risked anything for me when I needed it most." She looked away, feeling something deep inside her heart, something that wasn't fear anymore, but love. The sun had barely risen when the sky broke open again. Engines roared as black ships descended, the Emperor's crest flashing on their sides. Lyra grabbed Jake and hid him behind an old cargo container. "Stay there," she whispered. "No matter what happens." The ships landed with thunderous force, sending waves of dust through the air. Dozens of armored hunters stepped out, weapons glowing blue. Ethan stood in the center of the yard, holding his plasma wrench like a weapon of war. The leader of the hunters raised his voice. "Step aside, human. Give us the girl, and maybe we'll let your planet live." Ethan smirked. "Sorry, but the girl doesn't belong to anyone anymore." The hunter laughed. "You're outnumbered 10-1. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Yeah, but you forgot something." He pointed at the sky. "This is my scrapyard." He pressed a button on his wristband. Suddenly, the ground shook as old ships came alive. Engines roaring, drones buzzing into the air, hidden turrets opened fire, blasting the first wave of hunters with bursts of energy. The battlefield lit up with chaos, metal flying, explosions flashing in every direction. Lyra stepped forward, her hands glowing bright white. She felt the strange energy inside her pulse stronger than ever. With a cry that shook the air, she released it, sending a wave of power that threw enemy soldiers off their feet. Ethan watched in awe as her eyes blazed like twin stars. The hunters regrouped, firing back with plasma rifles. A bolt hit near Ethan, knocking him down. Lyra screamed his name and ran to him. Kneeling beside him, "I'm fine," he gasped. "Keep fighting." She turned back to the enemy, her power flaring even brighter. It wasn't just defense anymore, it was fury. Years of pain and shame burning into strength. Every step she took left a trail of silver light. The hunters tried to aim, but their weapons malfunctioned, systems melting under her power in minutes. The scrapyard became a storm of light and fire. When the last hunter ship exploded, silence returned, broken only by the crackle of fire and the hiss of cooling metal. Ethan limped toward her, blood running down his arm but smiling. "You did it," he said softly. Lyra turned to him, tears in her eyes. "No, we did it," he chuckled weakly. "Guess broken things fight pretty hard." She caught him as he stumbled, her arms wrapping around him tightly. For a long moment, neither spoke. The rising sun cast golden light over the ruined battlefield. Behind them, Jake peeked out, his small voice trembling. "Dad, is it over?" Ethan looked at his son, then at Lyra, and finally nodded. For now, but in the distance, far beyond the desert horizon, the Emperor's fleet was already moving again, and though the battle was won, the war for freedom and love had only just begun. The sun was rising over the scorched scrapyard, painting the metal ruins in soft gold. The smell of smoke still lingered in the air, but the gunfire had stopped. Silence filled the workshop, peaceful, fragile, unreal. Ethan sat on a crate near the half-destroyed wall, his arm bandaged, his clothes torn, his eyes tired yet calm. Lyra knelt beside him, carefully cleaning the burn marks on his hands. Her touch gentle, almost trembling. "Does it hurt?" she asked softly. He smiled faintly. "Only when I breathe." Jake peeked from behind a pile of metal, his small face dirty but full of relief. "Dad, you're really okay?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah, buddy. We made it through, but deep inside he knew the Emperor wouldn't stop, not after this." Days passed, and the workshop slowly came back to life. Ethan rebuilt what was broken, Jake helped where he could, and Lyra, she had changed. Her silver skin glowed brighter, her eyes warmer and her steps lighter. She smiled more often, sometimes humming softly while fixing wires or washing the dishes. There was peace in her that Ethan couldn't explain. But there was also something else, something strange. She felt dizzy often, her heart beat faster, her energy shifting. At first, she thought it was exhaustion from the battle, until one morning, when she nearly fainted in the garden, Ethan caught her just in time. "Lyra, hey, look at me." She tried to speak, but her voice came out weak. "I'm fine. I think—" He frowned. "No, you're not. Sit down." He called the colony medic, an old friend who owed him more than one favor. The medic arrived, scanning Lyra with a small handheld device. As the scanner hummed, his face slowly changed, from confusion to disbelief. He blinked, then looked at Ethan. "You might want to sit down too," Ethan frowned. "What is it?" The medic swallowed hard. "She's pregnant." For a moment, no one moved. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. "That's impossible," she whispered. The medic showed the readings again. "I checked twice. She's carrying life, Ethan. A hybrid child." Ethan just stared, unable to speak. Lyra shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "No, I was declared barren by royal doctors years ago. They said I could never." She covered her mouth, trembling. "They said I was broken." Ethan reached for her hand, his voice low and full of warmth. "Looks like they were wrong." She looked at him, speechless as tears rolled down her cheeks. I don't understand," she whispered. "How could this happen?" He smiled softly. "Maybe life found a way again." His words echoed what he had once said in the greenhouse, and this time they didn't just sound like hope, they sounded like truth. Lyra pressed her hand gently against her stomach. There was no movement yet, but she felt something deep inside her. Warm, alive, real. A new heartbeat, small but strong. For the first time, she wasn't the Emperor's failure. She wasn't the infertile princess, she was a mother. That night, Ethan fixed the broken lights in the garden so they glowed softly against the desert sky. Lyra stood among the blooming flowers, her silver hair catching the moonlight. He walked up beside her quietly, holding a small blanket in his hands. "It was Jake's when he was a baby," he said shyly. "Figured, maybe we'll need it again." She looked at him, her eyes glistening. "You really believe this child can survive?" He nodded. "I believe in you." They stood together under the starlight, and for the first time, Lyra wasn't afraid of tomorrow. She whispered, "Do you think he'll come for me again?" Ethan sighed. "Probably. But next time he won't be fighting a broken princess. He'll be fighting a mother, and that's something far stronger." Lyra smiled faintly, resting her head against his shoulder. "I never thought I'd have a family," she said softly. He wrapped his arm around her. You didn't find one, Lyra. You made one. In the following days, news spread quietly across the stars. A secret whispered from ship to ship, from market to market. The infertile princess of Zynar had conceived with a human, a miracle, some called it. A scandal, said others, but for Lyra it was simply life returning where there was once only pain. Deep in the imperial palace, the emperor received the news. He stared at the holographic image of his daughter, standing beside the human, smiling, her hand on her belly. The cup in his hand cracked, spilling golden wine down his robe. Impossible, he growled. She was barren. They promised me. His advisor trembled. The child might change everything, my lord. A hybrid of two worlds. Silence. The emperor roared. If this spreads, it will destroy the bloodline. Prepare my fleet. I will end this myself. Back on Vera 5, Lyra looked up at the stars and whispered softly, If you're coming, father, come see what your broken daughter has created. And somewhere deep inside her, the tiny heartbeat fluttered, not just a child but a new beginning, a miracle that would shake the galaxy forever. The galaxy trembled with whispers. From the lowest mining colonies to the high halls of alien empires, one story echoed again and again. The infertile princess of Zynar carried a child, and the father was human. Some called it heresy, some called it hope. But to those who had suffered under the emperor's iron rule, it was a sign that something greater than bloodlines and power was about to rise. Far out on Vera 5, the desert winds howled softly over the quiet workshop. Lyra stood before the mirror, her reflection glowing faintly in the dawn light. Her silver skin shimmered with warmth, her hands resting gently over her swollen belly. Ethan stood behind her, tightening the straps on his travel pack. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. She looked at him through the mirror, her voice calm but firm. Yes, I do, he frowned. Lyra, your father, he's not going to listen. She turned, her eyes glowing softly. I'm not going there to beg him, Ethan. I'm going there to end this. He nodded slowly, understanding. For months, they had hidden, moved from place to place, but the Emperor's shadow grew larger every day. Lyra knew that if she ran any longer, their child would be born into fear, and she refused to let that happen. The day they left, Jake hugged her tightly, tears running down his face. Will you come back? He asked. Lyra smiled faintly, touching his hair. I'll come back with peace. Ethan placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Watch the place, champ. Jake nodded bravely. I will. Dad, bring Mom home. That one word, Mom, made Lyra's chest tighten. No title of princess or royalty had ever felt that heavy or that beautiful. Their ship lifted into the dark sky. Vera 5 faded behind them, replaced by the cold black of space. Ethan sat beside her, hands steady on the controls. You really think talking will stop him? He asked quietly. Lyra looked out the window, her voice soft but full of fire. I don't plan to talk. I plan to show him. When they entered Zynar Prime's orbit, a massive fleet appeared, dozens of Imperial ships blocking their path. A transmission came through, unidentified craft. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. Ethan grinned. Same old welcome. Lyra closed her eyes, and energy shimmered faintly around her skin. Open the channel, she said. When the Emperor's face appeared on the screen, his expression was carved in stone. Daughter, he said coldly. You shame me with every breath you take. Lyra met his gaze. You shamed yourself long before I was born. He rose from his throne, rage in his eyes. You defy your blood, your people, and your name. She touched her belly gently, and yet, this life inside me proves that your name means nothing compared to what I've found. The Emperor's hand trembled as he pointed toward her. You've polluted our bloodline with a human. You've destroyed generations of purity. Lyra smiled faintly. Purity never built a future, Father, only love does. The Emperor's voice boomed through the transmission. If you come here, I will erase you from history. Lyra's tone was calm, almost peaceful. Then you'll have to look me in the eye when you try. The ship descended through the golden clouds of Zynar Prime. Alarms echoed across the palace as the Imperial guards surrounded the landing platform. Ethan looked at her one last time. You sure about this? She nodded, her eyes glowing brighter than ever. Yes, it's time the galaxy sees what love can do. The doors opened, and she stepped out first. Her silver hair fluttered in the wind, her skin shining with light that no armor could dim. The guards raised their weapons, but none dared shoot. There was something divine in her presence, something untouchable. Ethan followed, walking beside her, unarmed but unafraid. They walked through the courtyard as the Emperor appeared at the top of the stairs. For a long moment, father and daughter stared at each other across the great hall. No words, only the echo of everything lost and everything gained. Then, the Emperor spoke, his voice breaking. "Why did you come back?" Lyra lifted her head high, her voice steady. "To forgive you." He froze, his golden crown trembling in his hands. "You, forgive me," he whispered. Lyra nodded, tears in her eyes. "You sold me because you believed I was broken. But I was never broken, Father. You just couldn't see the kind of strength love creates." The Emperor dropped to his knees, the great hall falling silent. He reached out a trembling hand toward her, but stopped halfway. Tears filled his ancient eyes. "I have been a fool," Lyra smiled softly. "Then stop being one. Help me build something better." Behind her, Ethan stepped forward, wrapping his arm gently around her. The Emperor looked at them both, then at the glow of life within her in that moment. The most feared ruler in the galaxy bowed his head, not to a soldier, not to an enemy, but to his daughter, the daughter who had found life in the arms of a human. Months later, the galaxy changed. The Xynar Empire signed the first peace treaty with humanity, and in the heart of the palace gardens, under the twin moons, a small child was born, half human, half alien, pure miracle. When she opened her eyes, they shone like her mother's, silver with warmth. Ethan laughed softly, holding her close. "Welcome to the world, little one." Lyra smiled through tears, whispering, "You are proof that nothing stays broken forever." High above them, the stars glittered like witnesses to a new age. A human mechanic and a once broken princess had changed the course of worlds. Not with weapons, not with power, but with kindness, courage, and love strong enough to heal the universe itself.